Welcome back into the Lions247 Podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We continue to work our way towards Penn State's official whiteout game of the 2024 season. It's really the second one because there was that impromptu whiteout during Illinois week, but this is the one that we've had circled on the calendar for a while. The defending, or I should say the reigning runner-ups at the national championship level make their trip. This is a much different Washington squad than the one we saw reach the title game last year. They are 5-4. We're going to focus on the Huskies a little bit more on our next episode of this podcast. And we're bringing you an extra episode of this podcast this week, just to make you aware. We joined you on Monday, myself, Mark Brennan, Daniel Gallen, coming off of James Franklin's weekly press conference, top takeaways from a loss to Ohio State, key concerns moving forward for the Nittany Lions as they try to right the ship and get to the college football playoff. And then later this week, we'll have those guys both back on board with us to discuss what we witnessed from a midweek session at Penn State practice, what James Franklin had to say afterwards, and a lot more. And then, of course, we'll come back with a Saturday night postgame podcast. But we're adding one more episode because we feel like it needs an entire episode to catch up on recruiting with Tyler Calvaruso. A lot coming out of the Ohio State game, including a new commitment on board, a top 24/7 commitment at that, and then a lot more coming this weekend. You know, when the whiteout's in town, top prospects will be here as well. It's an 8 p.m. kickoff. That gives high school players across the region a little bit of time to get here, even if they were to have a Saturday game, certainly if they have a Friday night game. So to break everything down that we need to know on the recruiting trail, including a little bit later, the top-rated commitment ever for Penn State basketball, who opened their season with a win on Monday, Tyler Calvaruso has all the info for us, and we always appreciate you hopping on the pod. As I said, this is all your episode. We're not going to make you share it with anyone because we have a lot to get to.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens when you host more than 150 recruits on campus. We definitely got to take our time because there's a lot to sort through, including a commitment coming out of the weekend. You know, Penn State fell short on the field, but really based on some of the feedback, obviously the commitment that I just mentioned wasn't a lost weekend. There was still some productivity on the recruiting trail for sure.
Let's talk about that commitment. It was an in-state defensive back, Matt Sieg. He is a do-it-all standout for his high school squad, but he's projected to play safety here down the road at Penn State in the 2025 class. And I'm sorry, 2026 class, I should say. And with Sieg, this is a guy that we saw on the field with James Franklin before, shaking his hand, giving him a big hug. Then we saw him gather up with the commits. Seemed to be some celebration down there pregame at midfield before kickoff against Ohio State. A few minutes later, we get the "We Are Better" tweet from James Franklin, and we get an answer that Matt Sieg did indeed jump on board. Break down the addition for us and what this pursuit meant for Penn State.
We were definitely keeping an eye on Sieg heading into the weekend. You know, he's been really, really high on Penn State throughout his process, had visited multiple times heading into this weekend. Just saw the Nittany Lions in action the previous weekend on the road at Wisconsin. The way we talked about Sieg really throughout his recruitment going back to last fall when Penn State offered, it kind of always had this overarching theme of it might not be if, more so when. And you saw that transpire on Saturday before kickoff because even going into the weekend, Sieg was kind of non-committal on taking additional visits before getting to Penn State 2 weekends in a row. The Ohio State game, he's going to be back on campus for the whiteout this weekend. And at the end of the day for him, really, he just sat down with his family and said, this is a really, really good option for me. It's close to home. It checks all the boxes from an on and off field perspective. Why prolong something that's probably going to happen down the road at some point anyway? Wraps things up early, wants to be a leader in this class, help get some of the fellow top prospects in Pennsylvania on board in that 26 class, which already ranks third nationally, according to the 24/7 composite. So Penn State's rolling there. Matt Sieg, latest addition. I think it's a really important addition as well because he's risen to prominence and he's become known throughout Pennsylvania for his play at quarterback for Fort Cherry. But we're talking about a kid who runs a 4.4 40. He's fast. He's athletic. He's versatile. He projects as I think, a solid safety at the next level. Penn State's pretty excited about this get. Anthony Poindexter is one of his top guys at the position in the 26 class. So a lot to like about this commitment from the Penn State perspective.
Do I have this right? 60-plus total touchdowns as a sophomore? Yeah. So he's a guy who has done a lot of good things on the field for Fort Cherry High School there in southwestern Pennsylvania. 60 plus touchdowns last year. Now as a junior, continuing to show up in a big way, and a key member of Penn State's recruiting class now for 2026. And they continue to stockpile in-state standouts. He's number 3 on that list in our rankings at 247 Sports. He's number 12 nationally when you look at the safety rankings. But now, there's only 3 of the top 5 commits in the 2026 cycle for Pennsylvania are committed somewhere. They're all committed to Penn State. Kevin Brown, an offensive tackle from Harrisburg, he's number 2 on that list. Messiah Minkins is number 5 on that list. He's a running back from Harrisburg. And now Sieg, number 3 on that list, the safety out of Fort Cherry. So a strong start to the in-state recruiting efforts for 2026. And when you look at Matt Sieg, in this particular Penn State perspective, he's a guy that I think if you turn on the tape, if you're a coaching staff in different corners of the country, you might have a different opinion of where he goes in the field. Why do you think safety is the spot where he's going to be in any line?
I think really throughout his process, a lot of coaches have centered in on his ability to really move on the back end, play that center field role, given his athleticism, be a potential strong cover guy once he comes into his own at the position. Because there are still some things he's going to have to learn playing the position, given the fact that a lot of his focus in high school has been on offense and, being that guy for Fort Cherry and helping to take that program to new heights. But when you take in the measurables, 5'11.5", around 185, he has a frame that could carry more good weight, so we could deal with the physicality of playing the position at the next level. And the testing numbers, again, I mentioned 4.40, very strong in the agility department. He could go either way in college, not at quarterback, but on offense. If you put the ball in his hands at a running back or a wide receiver role, I honestly think he could do that at the next level, to a high level as well. But safety has been the talking point for Sieg, really every program that's been involved with him. And there were plenty that jumped in right along with Penn State dating back to last fall. So I think it's a combination of the athleticism and also his football IQ. What's between the ears, his acumen there. His experience at quarterback, it's going to allow him to process opposing offenses. And he even told me when I talked to him after his commitment that that's something he feels that he could use to his advantage. He could be one of those guys that maybe has an idea of where the play is going before the play even unfolds, just given what he sees on the offensive side of the ball. Playing on the other end, he might be able to recognize some patterns, formation, consistency, stuff like that. So it's not just the athleticism, which is very much there, and I think a large part of the appeal with Matt Sieg. It's what's in between the ears as well.
You mentioned I mentioned really the success in Pennsylvania for this 2026 cycle with Brown and Sieg and Mickens on board. The man who tops that list is Joey O'Brien from LaSalle College High School in Eastern PA and right outside of Philadelphia. That's where Abdul Carter was a standout before he became a Nittany Lion. And he was also just on campus. And we have an update there. Tall, long, labeled an athlete in 24/7 Sports Assessment. I think he's number 8 overall among athletes. He's top 80 regardless of position. Give us a little bit of the specifics on position for him with Penn State and then the impression that they were able to make on his latest trip to campus.
I think that athlete label is starting to ring more and more true for O'Brien because he's having a monster junior season going both ways for LaSalle. LaSalle's really opened up its offense with Gavin Sidwar under center, the 2026 quarterback who was committed to Rutgers until recently, just opened things up. Him and O'Brien have been one of the best duos in Pennsylvania throughout this high school football season. And while all of that's been going on, O'Brien's been his usual lockdown self on defense, giving LaSalle those really, really good reps at the safety position. I think so far, a lot of Penn State's conversations with O'Brien have centered around safety, and that has went over well with him. But as time goes on and his film continues to circulate and the evaluation process continues, I think there's a chance that there's some conversations about him playing on offense as well because his tape so far this season at receiver and what he's been able to accomplish at the position so far this year has just been vastly impressive, really, no matter how you slice it. He's probably one of those guys I think at this point in the cycle falls into the category where just get him and figure it out once he gets to town because he's going to be a high level, at least he projects to be a high level player at the next level, I think regardless of position. The athleticism, the size is definitely what stands out about Joey O'Brien, the way he moves at 6'3" and 185 pounds. And he had a really good visit for the Ohio State game. He did. And it's just centers around the fact that James Franklin really, really wants Joey O'Brien, which will come as absolutely no surprise given our previous conversations about him and his place in the rankings among Pennsylvania recruits. Penn State wants to keep the best in Pennsylvania. Joey O'Brien is the best in Pennsylvania right now. Terry Smith's been pretty involved here, as always, in the in-state recruiting efforts, and Anthony Poindexter has done a really good job of building a relationship with O'Brien. So, really, regardless of where he lands at the next level position-wise, the relationships at Penn State are in place. And I think the Nittany Lions have it's still early, and he's still going through his process, going to be taking other visits. I think Penn State has maybe turned the tide a little bit than it previously had entering the fall. He's got that Notre Dame crystal ball prediction up on his 24/7 profile. Fighting Irish are still right involved, but more ask around, more I'm hearing about Penn State, so I think that's encouraging for sure.
Let's stick with the in-state theme here and talk about some flip targets, shall we? Because they were in town. They were in Beaver Stadium. They did not see Penn State pick up that long-awaited victory over Ohio State, but they were a part of the record-setting crowd in that stadium, 111,000. And we know what an environment in Happy Valley can look like for a game like that. So let's begin at the quarterback position. Matt Zollers popped up on the guest list later last week. He has been committed to Missouri for some time. He's dealing with an injury right now. He was using crutches. So his senior season's been a bit of a wash because of that issue, but remains a top 10 quarterback in our rankings at 247 Sports. He's a guy that Penn State was involved with Andy Kotelnicki, before Andy Kotelnicki a bit. And now that we get through this point, and he's visited and he spoke with Brian Doan, what do we make of it? Is this a chapter closed, or is this a kind of a chapter that's just starting to open?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's closed just because, one, we all know how crazy recruiting is these days. The unexpected has become the expected at this rate. And, anytime a guy pops up on a campus where he's not committed this late in the game, it's noteworthy, but I don't necessarily anticipate this being something that will come to fruition for Penn State. I think Penn State will continue to work it. And, in the event anything happens, see where things go. But based on the feedback, Zoller seems pretty solid with Mizzou and his commitment to play for Eli Drinkwitz down in the SEC right now. He's going to be back in Missouri this weekend. Check back in with that staff that he's gotten to know quite well throughout his recruitment. And, this is part of it now, or every recruitment. Even if you don't get him on the first go around, maybe down the road, you've got a good relationship in place. You continue to build on that. Maybe down the road, if he winds up at Missouri, decides later on in his career he wants something else, maybe that gives Penn State the potential to circle back. That's something that we have to discuss as really part of every recruitment right now. It's not just the high school, the immediate, it's about the future as well. So I wouldn't necessarily anticipate Zollers winding up flipping. But, we'll see. There's still a month to go, before actually less than a month now before that signing period starts.
Yeah, it's a little earlier in December now, folks. A few weeks earlier. Used to be towards Christmas. Now, like you said, it's just about a month away, just a tick under a month away. Zollers is the number 2 overall recruit in Pennsylvania's 2025 class. So we're talking about high school seniors here. Number 1 on that list is tight end Andrew Olish, a long-term Penn State priority, who, like Zollers, chose somewhere else when he announced the commitment this summer. He picked Michigan, did Andrew Olish, and that was after he made his official visits, and he got a chance to explore some things. That was July when he announced that the Wolverines were the choice. But it's been clear that he's at least entertaining the idea of other schools, and Penn State got its shot to make a swing here. And did they make a dent in the situation?
I'm kind of still at the place where if there's a program that is going to flip Olish from Michigan, I think Penn State has put itself in a strong position to do that if he does want to move off that commitment to the Wolverines. But he's still got that visit to Notre Dame coming up. That's something we got to continue to monitor. Again, Notre Dame's reputation with tight ends is well documented. It's going to be a big part of that pitch to Olish while he's on campus for his official visit with the Fighting Irish. But the feedback I've gotten really asking around, I think Penn State feels good about what it accomplished with Olish and his family while he was on campus, even though the result wasn't what it was. We always say it goes far beyond that. A lot of it has to do with process. And so far, it sounds like Olish liked what he saw out of Penn State against Ohio State. So I'm kind of in the same place where I was leading into the visit, which I would classify as a good thing, because I said last week that I felt if a program was going to make a move, Penn State had given itself a real chance, maybe even put itself in the best chance of any of those flip contenders. And I still feel the same way coming out of the weekend.
Penn State's done some damage on the flip front. They brought in Matthew Outen, who's a top 24/7 receiver. He had initially committed to Virginia Tech. He'll be on campus next year as a freshman. And then Cameron Smith, who is their top-rated in-state commitment, linebacker from St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia, previously committed to Duke before jumping on board with Penn State. Another name to get to as we get closer to National Signing Day is at the receiver spot. Now, he plays ball down at Maryland at Milford Mill Academy, but Romero Eisen plans on playing college ball out in Los Angeles. He's committed to Big Ten newcomer USC. He's been pledged to the Trojans since April, and yet there he was in the stands in Beaver Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, so Penn State had Eisen originally slated for that first official visit weekend, May 31st through June 2nd. Didn't get the chance to host him, but never dipped off in terms of contact. That was not one Penn State let go. They tried to get him back for the last bash at the end of July. Didn't happen, but again, Penn State did not let off. They continued to be in contact with Eisen, and that led to this visit coming together for the Ohio State game. This is another one of those deals where I do think Penn State has given itself a chance to make a move. I do. The feedback post-visit has been positive. Eisen has always had a good relationship with James Franklin. Let's make that clear. The relationship between those two has always been strong, and I think that has definitely helped Penn State down the stretch here. You know, Marcus Hagans has gotten to know Eisen quite well throughout this recruitment, and Eisen in the past has expressed a strong relationship with him. So that's another feather in Penn State's cap here. Now, moving forward, you know, with this final month of the regular season, does Eisen get back to campus for another visit? That's what I'm keeping probably the closest eye on with him right now. Doesn't sound like he's going to visit for the whiteout, but there is still an open date, November 30th, when Penn State hosts Maryland for that regular season finale. That's just before the beginning of the signing period. So if an official visit's going to happen, it's probably going to be that weekend. And if it does come together and does take place for Penn State that weekend, all bets might be off. I think the Nittany Lions would have a real chance to sway Eisen while he's on campus. But again, we got to see if that winds up happening. He's also been to Maryland this fall, and he's going to be at Georgia for an official visit coming up here pretty shortly. I'm watching that one really closely. SEC official this late in the game to Georgia of all places, you got to keep a really watchful eye on that one.
Let me ask you something on Eisen, because he is the number 78 wide receiver in all rankings at 247 Sports. He's in 3-star territory. He's the number 16 player in Maryland. When you look at the composite rankings, it paints a rosier picture for who he is as a prospect. Number 53 among wide receivers, number 9 in the state of Maryland. He's a 4-star composite, which is the industry average here for the recruiting world's view of Eisen. I mean, Georgia is in play. He's committed to USC. They have stockpiled some really strong receiver talent, and now Penn State's trying to make this push. Do you think this is a prospect who is maybe evaluated in Power 5, Power 4 programs a little bit differently than how he's ranked on our site currently?
For sure. And some of that might have to do with some of his testing numbers don't necessarily jump off the page and wow you like they do some other highly ranked wide receivers in the 2025 class. What stands out to me with Eisen watching his film, he's got really, really strong short area quickness. That helps him get in and out of his breaks nicely. He's a good route runner. I think he still has a lot of ceiling left, so I think there's still plenty of room for development with him. Yeah, the consensus I've gained in asking around is Penn State, elsewhere, that their Power 4 coaching staffs are higher than on Eisen than the industry is, and Penn State falls into that category.
Let's turn our attention to one more flip target. This one in the 2026 class. The last few we talked about were 2025. So more room to work on this one, but it's a unique one. Payton Fowkes, in-state player, but there is certainly a question about what position that it would be best suited to play at the Power Conference level. Right now, he is committed to play quarterback for Virginia Tech. Penn State would love to take a look at him at tight end and get a chance to develop him at tight end. Where have we heard this play out? Well, class of 2020 standout Tyler Warren initially committed to Virginia Tech before his junior year of high school to play quarterback. By the time it was signing day, he was on board with Penn State with a future at tight end. He now has made the case as America's most complete tight end prospect in year 5 on campus. So we know that this has been done before, but every case is unique. I'm not going to say it's the exact same situation. So what can you tell us about Payton Fowkes, maybe the conversation that he has had with the Nittany Lions, and maybe the internal dialogue that he's dealing with, because it's not just about Penn State or Virginia Tech. It's about quarterback or tight end.
Yeah, there are multiple facets to this. The first of which being when he committed to Virginia Tech in late June, he committed to the Hokies as a quarterback. And right now that remains the plan. And it sounds like he's still set on playing quarterback at the next level. We'll see if that changes moving forward. Virginia Tech's going to give him the opportunity to do that. And Penn State, they haven't, they haven't stopped trying to sway him. James Franklin dropped by Nazareth during Penn State's second bye week. And Falzone hasn't exactly shut down communication or contact with the Nittany Lions. You saw that with the visit over the weekend. I think Penn State left a positive impression on Falzone. Position aside, right now, I do think he was impressed with the atmosphere inside Beaver Stadium, the overall state of the program. From my conversation with him, he sounded pretty positive on his reviews of Penn State. He gave the visit overall high marks, which is encouraging if you're the Penn State staff. He also made sure to reiterate, hey, look, I'm committed to Virginia Tech. There are plenty of reasons why I feel good about where I'm at with the Hokies. Praise Brent Pryce staff, praise the Virginia Tech fan base and the vibe they bring to Lane Stadium every single weekend. So we'll see where this one goes. Getting Falzone back to campus, though, on Saturday, that was the first step in the right direction. If you continue building on that, maybe get him back for a junior day, a spring practice visit, you can parlay that into an official down the road. But we're a little bit of ways from that. When it comes to Saturday, it went well.
It's just a really unique story, and he's got a lot to figure out, and it's it's just you can't really put yourself in someone else's mind because it's not black or white with this decision for Falzone. And as I said, he's only a high school junior right now, so there are opportunities for him to maybe camp with Penn State again, to come back here for a junior day or another game, and being a guy who's within the region, within the state. As long as the Nittany Lions want to keep tabs on him, they should be able to do that. I think it's interesting here to note that Virginia Tech's quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator, Tyler Bowen, was Penn State's tight ends coach when they convinced Tyler Warren to make his move. So a little bit of a full circle experience there. Let's go and focus on others who were in the building for the Ohio State matchup. And as you said, more than 150 prospects was the final tally. Not every single one of them is going to be a highly rated blue chip, but there's a mix in terms of age and class and a mix in terms of skill set as well. And so we're going to focus on a few that you suggested, Tyler, that really stood out to you. I don't know where you want to start it, but I think a good place could be Larry Moon, who's a younger player on this list, but he's a 2027, but maybe the most impressive defensive back, cornerback recruit that we saw on the camp circuit here at Penn State this year, helping Alacupa go capture a 7-on-7 tournament championship. And he's somebody who has played above his age, above his class for a while, and there's a reason he is one of the most coveted players at his position nationally.
Yeah, Larry Moon is he's really, really good. And we're early in the evaluation process for the 27s, but there are some evaluations I don't necessarily expect to change as time goes on. Sometimes we see a guy like Moon who is highly touted early in the cycle. Then as things go on, the offers, they dry up, schools going other directions. I don't anticipate that happening with Moon. I think he's that kind of player. I think Penn State thinks he's that kind of player. It has been made crystal clear to Moon early on, ever since Penn State offered last fall when he was a freshman at Central Catholic, we want you here. And as such, Moon is prioritizing Penn State as one of his top suitors in the early going. He's feeling the love from Terry Smith. He's feeling the love from James Franklin, and he's big on relationships. And he has been very pleased by the manner in which Penn State has prioritized building a strong relationship with him and his family. It was interesting heading into the visit because Moon hadn't been back in a little while. So this was his first time around the staff in a little bit. It went really, really well, I think, as we were anticipating, because, again, we knew going in those relationships were in a good place. It was kind of a reinforcement to Moon of Penn State being one of his top options. And I expect that to continue moving forward. Moon's feedback, direct feedback, was pretty telling. When you've got a guy saying, hey, look, I'm going to continue to show Penn State love and prioritize them as a top of the list option for me because of the way they're showing love, that's a recruitment that has serious staying power. And Penn State wants to keep Moon within state lines. I think they're going to have a chance to do that. Still a long way to go. We're talking about a 30-plus offer prospect who's been making the rounds this fall. He's been to Ohio State. He's checked out SEC programs. He's made it out to Oregon to camp. in the past. So he's entertaining all of his options, as he should this early in the process. But Penn State's one of those ones that's going to be there until the end. At least that's the early read.
From a standout in Western PA with Moon to one in Eastern PA in Philadelphia, Newman Goretti High School is where you'll find Wydeek Collier. About 6'6", 200-pound frame. You let your imagination run with him a little bit. Imagine what he might look like as an edge rusher when he's 20 years old here if he were to play for Penn State. Got a little bit of a look at him on the camp circuit. Top 10 player in the state of Pennsylvania, number 9 on that list for the 2026 cycle, and he was also in Beaver Stadium on Saturday.
He's down to 5 schools. Penn State is among those finalists at this point. The Nittany Lions are kind of not starting to, because I think they've kind of been in this spot for a little bit now. They're kind of starting to separate themselves from the pack. That relationship with Deion Barnes is pivotal here. Collier wants a defensive line coach and a staff that he's comfortable with from an off-the-field perspective, and he's not really closer than anyone else than Barnes. They have the same Philadelphia background. For Collier, that makes Barnes really, really easy to talk to. That's been a big deal with him, really, ever since I connected with Collier dating back in the spring. He has always praised Deion Barnes and his ability to relate. So that's a huge plus here. He wanted to get back to Penn State before the fall came to an end to see Tom Allen's defense in action. Wanted to see Deion Barnes' defensive line in action because since he got the offer in May, this is his first chance to see a Penn State game. And I think it resonated with him positively from my conversation with him. I think moving forward, Penn State I think they're going to be tough to beat. He's a high upside prospect. Penn State really, really likes that about him. You've already got a high upside edge rusher on board in this 26 class, and Daniel Jennings from West Virginia, who's also on campus over the weekend and will be back for the whiteout. Collier profiles as a guy as time goes on. He doesn't have a timeline for a decision yet, and he's working on planning out other visits. Miami's done a good job with him. Rutgers has done a really good job with him. He's been to Piscataway for a visit, so Greg Schiano and his staff have done a good job. Hughes is in the mix. West Virginia's in the mix, so it's not done, but Penn State has put itself in a pretty strong position.
Another player here in the state of Pennsylvania for the 2026 cycle, still unrated within our 247 Sports Network. I'm sure that will change, but an offensive lineman from Riverside High School, about a dozen offers to his credit. Tavion Branch, he's a guy that made some moves with the Nittany Lions staff during the offseason, and he made his trip back to State College. How much is Branch a guy that, despite kind of, I don't want to say it's in obscurity, but his recruiting profile isn't where some of the others we've discussed to this stage, at least within our 247 Sports Network. Is he somebody that warrants more attention than what might meet the eye in terms of what Penn State wants to accomplish for its 2026 class?
For sure. Penn State really likes him, would take Branch in its 26 class right now if he wanted to go. And quite frankly, I think of all the 26s we're watching, the closest, Branch might be the one I'm closest on a crystal ball. Talking to people familiar with his recruitment, he loves Penn State. He loves the culture within the program, loves the staff, loves Phil Trotwine. So Penn State has a lot going for it here right now. The difference here for me, because anytime that you have a group of kids visiting campus twice in as many weekends, it opens your eyes. Branch falls into that category because he's going to be back for the whiteout. But unlike a guy like Matt Sieg, who was non-committal with his visit plans beyond a stretch of 2 visits in 2 weekends, Branch has told me he still wants to take visits. He wants to get to Tennessee, hopefully by the end of the fall. He's going to be at Pitt for a visit before the end of the fall. So there are still some places that he wants to see when his schedule frees up a little bit. That's the only thing giving me a little bit of pause right now, because obviously you want to see where things go with those visits. But Penn State is standing out as Branch's top choice right now. And that's what I've been able to gather. And Penn State would love to have him in their class.
One more name, Tyler, from that Ohio State game guest list that we wanted to talk about. And you spoke about him last week heading into that matchup was Connor Salmon, top 200 overall recruit in the 2026 class. He's a wide receiver from Woodgrove High School in Virginia. And he's got quite the collection of offers, about 30 offers total. But Penn State just keeps getting him back.
Yep, they do. And that's crucial because he's a really strong wide receiver prospect. You talk about guys who can help you beat a program like Ohio State. Connor Salmon's one, but he can run. He's really, really good route runner. He's good hands, just high-level prospect at the position. And Penn State is prioritizing as such. Salmon told me the Nittany Lions remain one of his top choices coming out of his visit. He loves the staff. High praise for James Franklin and Marcus Hagan. Going to be at Notre Dame over the weekend for another visit. He's another guy who's making the rounds. seems like a decision is further off than most. He could definitely go through his officials, but Penn State is standing out early. And that's where you want to be going into this end of the fall winter place, because it sounds crazy to say, but a couple months from now, me and you are going to be talking about junior days, and Penn State will be pushing to get a guy like Connor Salmon back to campus as one of its top targets. Where do you want to be going into those junior day visits? I think Penn State has positioned itself nicely.
Before we turn our attention towards the whiteout, and that is going to be a big recruiting opportunity as well, we talked to going in about what a Penn State win might mean for recruiting if they were able to finally break through, beat the Buckeyes on that big of a stage. As we know, and as we've documented here on the podcast earlier in the week, it didn't happen that way. And it was an underwhelming performance overall, I would say, for Penn State. So how much stock do you put into that impacting Penn State's recruits? Or is this more about the experience, the attention from the staff, and the continued communication coming off of a visit like this?
Experience, attention from the staff, which was tough because a lot of guys were a little bit later getting to campus due to traffic. Tom Lemming had his annual photo shoot before the game. So some guys were
there. Was traffic on Saturday morning? I wasn't aware of that. I only sat in it for 2 hours during a 5 mile drive.
Yeah, which is great because me and you were going opposite ways. I was driving back and I hit zero traffic, so that was nice. But anyway, yeah, I would say that experience and overall atmosphere inside the stadium, that impressed a lot of guys. And look, Penn State definitely would have benefited from a win. I think they could have definitely received a little bit of a boost from that. But we always say it's not the end-all, be-all. I'm not going to change my tone now because these recruits, they look, whenever they take visits, they look beyond the final score. They look beyond what transpires on the field that day. They reflect on experience. They reflect on their relationship. They reflect on conversations with the staff. And there are always those guys who are very drawn to the pitch of, hey, look, we came up short this year. We got a guy like you out here. It's going to be a different story. So that always factors into the equation. I mean, could it hurt certain kids, especially the ones who are maybe considering Ohio State? They take a look at the recent history between Penn State and Ohio State, who's coming up on top in those matchups. Maybe. But it's not, I wouldn't classify it as a severe detriment to Penn State's recruiting efforts. I also get the sense that it helps Penn State that they have another big weekend coming up. So you could, shake off the stink of that loss. You get back with another big recruiting weekend and you continue to move forward.
Yeah, moving forward, we'll look at some of these guests that are anticipated and confirmed already at Lions247. And let's go to another top 5 Pennsylvania prospect. I mentioned that they've been in really good spot with the 2026 class, and Joey O'Brien was the number 1 guy on there. Well, the only other uncommitted player in that top 5 for Pennsylvania rankings, and everyone else is committed to Penn State, is Tyler Merrill. Big-time offensive line prospect, the guy that we've seen in multiple Penn State camps. Really thought he took a big step from a couple summers ago when he was pretty early on the scene to this most recent summer before his junior year of high school. Massive prospect. Ton of Big Ten powerhouses have been circling around him for a while. What kind of an opportunity is this for Penn State with Merrill?
So he was on campus for the Ohio State, going to be getting back for the whiteout. And Merrill has told me that his recruitment is going to go through official visits. There's still, he thinks those visits, those in-depth looks, the behind-the-scenes stuff is really, really important to his decision-making process. And once he commits to a school, he's going to be done because he wants to put it behind him, focus on his senior year. I think Penn State is in a good spot to receive one of those officials when that time comes, coming out of this visit. Again, going to be back again for the whiteout. More conversations with James Franklin, more conversations with Phil Troutwayne are on the horizon for Merrill. And the message from him has been really consistent. If he decides that he wants to play his ball closer to home, Penn State's going to be in a really, really strong position. You get the sense going into this whiteout visit that the Nittany Lions are in a solid position. But again, he's got a lot of strong outside options. And I think with him coming out of those visits, those officials, once that time gets here, he's going to be weighing his options, and not just weighing his options, but weighing the geographical aspect of all this. Does he want to expand? Does he want to stay a little bit closer to home? If he wants to stay close to home, I think it'll be Penn State.
And oh, by the way, speaking of offensive linemen in the state of Pennsylvania, Maxwell Hiller, who's a 5-star in the 2027 class, he's going back-to-back weekends too, right? He was up for the Ohio State game. He'll be back for the Washington game. So good stuff happening with some of these offensive linemen in the state of Pennsylvania for the Nittany Lions as they continue to get back to campus. Let's go to Ohio for the next two visitors on this Washington game list. Elbert Hill is one of the premier cornerbacks in the 2026 cycle. He's out of Akron, Ohio. He's number 8 at the position in 247 Sports rankings, number 53 overall in the nation for 2026. And then a little closer in terms of proximity to a decision is Chaz Coleman, because he's a 2025 recruit out of Warren, Ohio. A 3-star prospect right now. He's got that athlete label at 6'5", 225 pounds. One of those classic later risers in the cycle. And we're, again, a month away from signing day. So maybe start with Coleman. Tell us how much this visit matters to how much he might matter in the next month. And then go on to Hill, who is clearly a coveted commodity long-term.
Yeah, second official visit for Coleman after he checked out Kentucky late last month. And he's been probably one of the, if not the biggest risers in that 25 class here late in the game. Elite level athlete. Penn State sees a high level of upside with Coleman being an edge rusher, and he has developed into one of those top guys for Deion Barnes at this point in the cycle. If Penn State, was able to work some magic on Coleman and he decides that he wants to get on board coming out of this weekend, they would take him in this class and, really work with that upside that they love about him so much. It's still, I know we're less than a month and away from signing, but there's no guarantee Coleman signs early, given the nature of his recruitment. He could take this thing to February, use the winter to make more visits. So I think it's good for Penn State that it is getting Coleman on campus now, because that gives you an opportunity to maybe get this one done before that winter push from other programs. If Coleman does decide he wants to take things beyond the early signing period, if you could leave a really strong positive impression on him this weekend, it'll work well in your favor if Coleman decides, hey, look, I don't want to take this into the winter. I want to find my home now. I think Penn State has a chance to get him on board at some point with a strong weekend. We're going to see how things go there. With Hill, probably going to have to fight off.
Before we go to Hill, Coleman's position for Penn State would be?
Edge rusher, for sure.
Edge rusher. Okay, yeah. I know there's been some varied opinions. I figured that's where it was going to land, but okay. And then go ahead with Hill. Yeah,
you're probably going to have to fight off Ohio State to land Hill. Buckeyes are the crystal ball favorite right now. Ohio State's done a lot of good work with Hill, but he has a good relationship with Terry Smith too. So Penn State is fighting this fight. Originally sounded like Hill might make it to campus last weekend for the Ohio State game. Hoban actually had a pretty large contingent of prospects on campus for that. Didn't happen. He opted to go to Tennessee. But he's going to be back at Penn State this weekend for the whiteout. So it's an opportunity for Terry Smith to help his standing with one of the top names on his board. But right now, I've got Ohio State as the one to beat for Elbert Hill. There's room to make a push, but the Buckeyes are standing nicely.
Tight end, we talked about it before. It's a position that Penn State really should be able to hang with anybody on the recruiting trail right now based on what they've done on campus and what guys have done in the NFL coming out of this program. They've got 3 of the top 10 tight end recruits in the 2026 class set to be here this Saturday for the Washington matchup. Max Sutter out of Illinois is number 9 on that list. Evan Jacobson out of Iowa is number 8 on that list. And then Kendra Harrison, who we discussed a bit last week, he's number 1 on that list. And many believe he could be a 5-star when it's all said and done. He is a 5-star in the composite. So 3 guys, 3 separate recruitments, but Ty Howell has a really good opportunity here to impress.
Yeah, and like I said last week, when it comes to a guy like Harrison, Penn State has the ability to swing for the fences at tight end and actually have a chance with a guy like Harrison who has every offer he could possibly ask for. And, Penn State will look to make its push with him. Sutter and Jacobson really jump out as top targets right along with Harrison as well. Sutter's been on the board dating back to the winter when he got his offer from the Nittany Lions. He's been around a little bit, so it'll be nice to get him back to campus from Penn State. Hal saw him during Penn State's first bye week. And Jacobson got his offer a little bit later. He picked up his offer from Hal in late June, but he has quickly jumped up that board. He's the number 8 tight end in the nation. Sutter's the number 9 tight end in the nation. So you see the quality of prospect that we're talking about here. I mean, even beyond those 3, Lincoln Watkins is a high 3-star prospect tight end recruit who's going to be on campus this weekend. So it's shaping up to be a busy weekend for Ty Howell on the recruiting front. And Penn State, again, we say it whenever we talk about Olish, so much to sell at the position right now. And you can believe Hal has been pushing that on his top guys.
I do want to finish with a basketball recruiting note here, Tyler, because a very, very big pickup for head coach Mike Rhoades and his staff at the tail end of last week as we were in the center of that Ohio State buildup, and there was such conversation around that matchup. Mike Rhoades goes and picks up Payton Mingo out of New York, and he is the number 1 rated recruit in Penn State history in the 24/7 sports era. So I'll note that it's a 24/7 sports era, which I think goes back now about 15 years or so when you look at the rankings that we've compiled on the site. But when you look at Mingo and this guard joining the Penn State class and a guy that they would like to build around, a top 50 prospect at this stage right now, how significant is this one for the Nittany Lions?
It's massive. I don't think that's hyperbole. I don't think that's exaggerating it in any sense. I think this is a massive get for Mike Rhoades, who in 2 full recruiting cycles at Penn State is responsible for 2 of the program's 3 highest rated commits in the 24/7 era. That tells you something. And with Mingo, who I got the chance to spend about 10 minutes talking to the other night, we'll have that up on Lions247 here soon. It's a great interview. I definitely suggest checking it out. He's very excited to be part of the future of this program. The biggest thing with Mingo was a lot of coaches who were starting out at a program. They can sell you on a vision, and that's all well and good. And a lot of guys buy in to that vision, depending on who the coach is, because some are better at selling it than others. Rhoades not just has a vision, he has results with what he's done with Ace Baldwin's development, dating back to when he was a freshman at VCU, and now what Baldwin is the straw that stirs the drink for Penn State in that backcourt. So Mingo looks at Rhoades and sees a coach who can develop him and get him to the NBA, which I don't think that's a conversation we've often had surrounding Penn State basketball program and, previous head coaches. I think Micah Shrewsbury got this thing kickstarted, and now Rhoades is keeping it rolling. And a guy like Mingo is just such a key piece for the future. Penn State worked so hard to help this one come together. From an on-the-court perspective, selling Mingo on the system, and off the court perspective, get everything where it needs to be on the NIL front, because this was a competitive recruitment on that front. Programs like Georgia were in the mix. So Wake did a really, really good job of selling Mingo on its system. Wake plays a really wide open style with his guards. And Mingo even told me it was not easy to say no to playing in that kind of system as a lead guard. But the relationship with Rhoades, the relationship with Jimmy Martelli, who probably has not gotten enough attention for his part in this recruitment, all of that led to Mingo jumping on board, committing to Rhoades, and he's hyped, man. He thinks this Penn State program could really take off in the next year or 2, and he's really, really excited, looking forward to be part of it and getting to campus. But for that, he's got a whole senior year to go through, and he's looking to arrive at Penn State an improved player. He wants to improve multiple aspects of his game. Again, we've got all the details on that coming up on the site here pretty soon.
A ton of coverage on Mingo's commitment over at 24/7 Sports Network. We had our lead analyst within our college basketball network at 24/7 Sports serve up a scouting report on what Penn State's getting in Mingo. So a lot of attention paid for this. And by the way, Penn State opened up its 2024-25 season on Monday night with a significant blowout victory over Binghamton. They were expected to cruise in that game, but they really did some impressive things, had some new pieces shine. A lot of coverage over at Lions 24/7, and Mark Brennan and Daniel Gallen will have you covered with hoops coverage throughout this season. That's going to do it for now, Tyler. Really appreciate you breaking down all sorts of recruiting updates for us. We needed to make this its own episode. I think that was the right call, and we'll catch up with you next week here on the podcast. But between now and then, I know you'll have a lot of coverage from leading up to Whiteout Weekend and coming out of Whiteout Weekend as it pertains to Penn State recruiting.
No doubt, man. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to getting back because it's going to be another one of those weekends where we have a lot to talk about.
Good stuff. Tyler Calvaruso, our resident recruiting expert at Lions247.com. Always good to get him here on the podcast. As I said, a bonus episode of the podcast this week because we wanted to give a whole show to the recruiting coverage. The next episode that you'll hear is going to be breaking down the Washington Huskies. They were in the national championship game last year. Now they're in the Big Ten. They're 5-4, coming off a win over USC, but they have not won on the road yet. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? Who are the players to know? And how has the acclimation process to this new conference been for that Washington program? We'll answer those questions on our next episode, followed by our traditional Thursday show where Mark Brennan and Daniel Gallen will join myself, and we will have a lot to discuss coming off of Penn State practice coverage, our latest opportunity to hear from James Franklin, and everything that we expect in the next few days, which is going to be player conversations as well. So we'll empty the notebook a bit on that episode, a couple more episodes ahead before we get to Saturday. For now, I'm stepping aside. This is Tyler Donahue, and this has been the Lions 247 Podcast.